Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Breaking the Blueprint. This is season 2, episode 1. And for full transparency, we're recording this episode before the Christmas break. Hence, you can see our lovely festive decorations here, but you'll be watching it on the other side. So just wanted to wish you all a wonderful Christmas. I hope you had a lovely festive period and you're now back in the office trying to remember your login password. Don't worry, we've been there too. How is your Christmas going so far?
Yeah, no, pretty good. We're just coming to the end of the year now. It's been a tough year, busy with work and everything else. And we've obviously finished the first season of Breaking the Blueprint. I can't believe it's been like nearly a year now. I think it's been a year. So as we kind of move into season 2, I'm just looking forward to the next 2 weeks of just taking a bit of a break. So good to be here and ready to go for 2026.
And of course we're before Christmas, but is the shopping for kids' presents and all of that thing going okay? What's been your retail customer experience?
I must say I've left that to the missus, unfortunately. So yeah, that's
fortunately.
Fortunately for me anyway. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's going well. We're just looking forward to a bit of downtime and then come back refreshed in the new year.
Yeah. Brilliant. As a reminder for people who may be tuning in, who have not watched this before, we started this podcast for a real specific reason. You know, customer experience had been boxed into this corner, a function, a team, a department that was tasked with doing all things customer experience. And when you and I met, we had this conversation about how do we break the conversation out of that box? How do we help people in organizations that wouldn't normally think about customer experience or the experience our customers have, to be more accurate, in their daily work, you know, marketing, finance, procurement, front office, back office, people around the organization. Because one of the things that's true about customer experience, it only really works when there's true collaboration in the organization, when the dots are joined across, that we've spoken about many, many times. So that's our prime objective here. And we like to bring in different guests, different people from different angles to join in the conversation. And today we have Jerry Angrave. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you.
Jerry and I met a while back. Our paths crossed through mutual contacts. I think LinkedIn's responsible for many relationships. Yeah. We had a couple of really great chats. But Jerry is doing some really, really interesting work in the world of accessibility. So I wanted to get him on to share some of his wisdom, some of his experience, and help us have some real deep conversation today. So Jerry, welcome to the pod and introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about you, what you do and your work and the boards that you sit on and the mission that you're undertaking.
Great. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's a really interesting time to be involved in customer experience. And it's my background. I'm originally a marketeer, so I came through that route. I was in corporate land and my roles then went into customer experience, which I think a lot of people have had the similar path. Yeah. And then back in 2012, I set up my own business as a customer experience consultant. And since then been working for organizations in a lot of different areas on their own customer experience programs. And I think you made the point really good at the start there. Yeah, it's not just about customer experience, it's about managing the experiences that they have in an intentional way that drives all sorts of benefits. So I love being in this field. On the accessibility side of things, personally, it's a real interest to me because I have a son who has what they might label an intellectual disability, and so it's a personal passion of mine. But as a result of that, I also now chair the Accessibility Advisory Board at Virgin Atlantic, and I sit on the advisory boards, the accessibility advisory boards at Heathrow Airport and Bristol Airport as well. So, my two favourite subjects, customer experience and accessibility, what's not to like. So, so really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's going to be a good one because, look, I'll make the apology right up front. I'm not an expert in this area, so excuse any clumsy language. It's not intentional. I'm not trying to offend anybody by labels or terminology that I'm not an expert in. But when we think about the accessibility market, let's call it a market for the sake of argument. When we think about people in that band, the statistics show there's 1.3 people globally that live with some kind of disability. And in the UK alone, what they call the purple pound, which I guess is referring to the disposable income or the spending power of that group of people, is worth around £274 billion. And it also, the research suggests that 75% of disabled customers avoid businesses with poor accessibility. So they'll look for people that will serve their need better, which makes sense. So when you look at that scale, when you look at the size of the market, you look at the number of people that are impacted, why do you think accessibility still feels a bit niche in organisations? And it's not a natural conversation so often.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I think for me, start going back to your original point about using the risk of using clumsy language. I think it's kind of, we all have that, still have it today. But I think that can sometimes make people a little bit wary of kind of leaning into it, if you like, because I don't want to offend anybody, so I better not do this or do that, and end up being sort of paralysed and not doing anything. In terms of the terminology, just on that for a moment, and we'll come back to the commercial side. I've had some really interesting conversations where we've talked amongst ourselves around these boards, these advisory boards, about what terminology do we use. And actually the key thing is, what terminology would our customers use? How would they describe themselves, if you like? And because part of the language was around customers with disabilities. And the thinking there was, actually, that's the wrong way of looking at it, because it should be, these are customers, people like you and me, who are disabled by the environment that we create for them. Mm-hmm. And I think having that mindset is really interesting, that actually we are putting barriers in their way, sometimes unintentionally, but the whole point is that they are less able to use our facilities, our stores, our shops, our car parks, our airports, because of some of the barriers that we put in place, whether that's physically or just thinking, actually, do you know what? They don't get it. I'm not going to go there because I've had horrendous experiences in the past. So I think framing the group that we're talking about, and the way we've landed it in most of the forums, is that we're talking about people who are disabled by the environment that they find themselves in. Because there's that social model and medical model of disabilities, which is around, medical model focuses on the disability. What is your disability? Which is a horrendous question.
Yeah.
But the social model is more about, okay, well, what barriers are we putting in place?
Yeah.
Whether you're walking down the street or buying something online, what are those barriers? So I think getting that framing right at the start is...
That's a really useful definition. And what it also does for me, it zooms us out. Because, look, I think many people might, when they think disability, immediately go to somebody that has a physical disability of some description, somebody who needs to use a wheelchair or have mobility challenges or that kind of thing. But actually, when you zoom out and say, by the barriers we create, not only does it include those people, but it brings in other groups that are unintentionally excluded by those barriers that are put in by the way that we design things or the way that we set up things. I think that increases that market.
And the way we expect everybody to use the facilities that we've had in place for a number of years. So, for example, on board an aircraft, there's very few aircraft have fully accessible toilets, bathrooms, lavatories, washrooms. And as a result, a lot of people who travel will say, actually, even though I'm going to be on a 7-hour flight, do you know what? I'm not going to drink because I know I can't use the toilets on board. So for 12 hours before I fly, I'm not going to drink, or I'm not going to eat, because often when I eat, I might be sick. I might have nausea, and I don't want to have that on the plane. So it's going back to the pure customer experience piece. It is about knowing your customers and their issues and their challenges and their anxieties and their worries and their hopes and their expectations. Yeah. So I think framing that is really a good starting point.
I think in recent years, I think what we've also seen is better awareness around the different types of disabilities. Like, there's a lot more awareness around like ADHD and other types of disabilities that are there. So it's just understanding whether that's now feeding into how these processes and these services are built, considering we are more aware of disability beyond the wheelchair, because that knowledge is pretty much there. So it's just, the question is, why is it taking so long for organisations to adopt the right processes
Yeah.
to develop that.
I think it's partly there is a recognition of the value, the commercial value.
Yes.
So you're right, and I think in the UK is that 1 in 4 people have a disability of some kind. But they're the ones that we kind of know about. And to your point, I think one of the challenges is that we're all different, thankfully. But we're all kind of fighting challenges that nobody else knows anything about. And I think maybe one of the challenges is if you're building a shopping centre or a railway system or an airport or a theatre or a sports venue, how are you going to cater for every single
it's difficult
challenge that everyone has, which is that's probably one of the difficulties is in getting to one of the, not the easy ways, but a way around that is to say, actually, if you train your people up, so your people understand that if somebody comes towards them and they're wearing the sunflower lanyard, for example, that they know that there might be some intellectual disability there, or a learning disability, or just somebody might have a colostomy bag that it might need changing, or they might have dementia, or they might be with somebody who has dementia. Then I think the training goes a long way in it. So I think maybe to answer your question, maybe the focus has been very much on how do we build a different physical environment or digital environment, but actually a quicker way is to make sure that your frontline people feel they're not going to get into trouble by having a conversation with somebody that might take a little bit longer. And just having that empathy and awareness.
I think it's how you kind of step up the awareness, and I think we can use a bit of technology perhaps around building personal preferences, knowing, obviously you mentioned the sunflower badge, that's obviously a physical way of doing it, but I think there's other ways in which where if you're registered with a particular condition and the business that you're engaging with is informed, and the frontline team are informed of what your personal preferences are from the outset, means that you're not having to consistently let people know. Like my son also has a particular condition, so he's peg fed, so we've always got to be considered when it comes to traveling in particular, but we've got to repeatedly tell people, and I think that's quite a difficult thing as a parent, because you're having to voice that every time. If only there was a way that before I engage the travel airline, they already know the preference of my child, so I don't have to repeat that to every frontline staff.
It's a really interesting point, because it's not right that parents need to repeat that information. And I think technology plays a big part in that, but I think, and this may help answer your previous question about why is it taking so long, is I think because the focus has been so much on what's the disability, what's the condition, and actually the focus needs to be how can we help. So when you book an airline ticket and you ask for assistance, you're also asked, well, what type of disability do you have? Or are you in a wheelchair, and is it a powered or is it a manual wheelchair? Do you have a vision impairment, that kind of stuff? Whereas it would probably be a lot more helpful to say, how can we help? How can we best help? And as you say, then you're not repeating that information so often.
And what that reminds me, in fact, you were speaking about, knowing the data up front and the experiences you have. Two things came to mind in your example of we focus so much on the physical. So one, my experience of I used to run special needs transport at National Express. I was managing director of the division that we had. And, again, it's only when you're involved in these areas that your awareness increases and you have a better understanding, right? But it's not just about the customer who has the disability or the challenge, but it's the people that are traveling with them. So often families would have 2 kids that would go to a mainstream school and 1 kid that was in a special needs school. But by that driver turning up late or not on time or something happening, it wouldn't just disrupt the education of one child, it has a knock-on effect on the other 2, the entire family. So that's part 1. So it's not just about the customer who has the challenge, it's about the kind of their family unit or the people they're traveling with. And then the second thing was I heard a horrible example. So Tanny Gray Thompson, I think it is the Dame Tanny Gray. She was speaking at an event that I was at, and she's in a wheelchair, former Olympian. and she turned up at one of the stations in London in rush hour and was at the barriers trying to get through. And the member of staff turned to her and said something like, I'm paraphrasing here, so I'm trying to remember what she said, but words to the effect of, can't you travel later? Don't you know that this is rush hour? And she went, beg your pardon? I mean, do you even have a job? What are you travelling for? And she explained that she was on her way to the Houses of Parliament to speak about this very thing with travel, ironically. And you still have examples of that now. They are extreme. You would hope that they're few and far between, but they do happen. And you hear these horror stories.
Yeah, unfortunately. And we have to learn from those. And it's not right that that still happens. But I think one thing to come out of it is using those examples in the training so that that person who spoke inappropriately can actually see the consequences of what they were talking about, both in terms of the physically, okay, well, what's the effect on that, but also the impact, as you say, that will have on people travelling with them, because that's a really awkward conversation to have, and it would actually make you think, do you know what, I'm not going to go by rail again, because I'm going to find another way to travel,
Exactly.
and it has all sorts of consequences. But I think part of it comes back to, as you were saying, that empathy, not just with the person, but with their family.
Yes.
So, if you're travelling with a child, who, if they're about to have an episode, if they're about to throw themselves on the floor and have a screaming fit, it's if that comes about because of some sudden some noises or flashing lights, or somebody who's getting a bit stern and a bit cross, going through security at an airport, somebody shouts at you, that can be a real trigger.
Yes, it can.
In the same way that suddenly bright lights can be a real trigger, strong smells can be a real trigger for some people.
Yeah.
So I think understanding your customer, what could be a trigger, and the impact it has, not just on them but on the family as well, is so important. I mean, it's like if you're travelling with someone who has Parkinson's, I keep using airports as an example, forgive me, but a lot of airports, the walkway, the flow will be nice white marble floors. The duty-free areas, the retail areas will be zoned, and they'll probably be black, kind of black spangly marble and stuff. The transition from one to the other, to a person who has either Parkinson's or maybe a vision impairment, that looks like a step.
Yes.
Is it up or is it down? Don't know. But it looks like a barrier of some sort.
Right.
And so it's understanding those kind of issues that makes you think, actually, if we get it right for the people who have the disability, then you're going to get it right for the whole family as well. Because what you don't want is for, you don't want anyone to have a bad experience, but it's just, but the PAs or the family or whoever is travelling with them, they're as much a part of that as well. And they're the ones who know that person the best. If you can't talk to that person directly, because some people may be tetraplegic, they may be in a wheelchair, not able to speak. And if they are, then heaven's sake, talk to that person, not in the way that your example just showed, but talk to that person, not the family member about that person, because by now they're still there. They can tell you what help they need. A lot of it comes back to the training.
Feels like that part of the reason why it still feels niche in many organisations is that awkwardness, the clumsiness of the language, the fear of saying the wrong thing is part of the discussion. But it's such a vast area of really trying to get into to understand that I guess it presents its own challenges in doing that. But for all said, there's progress being made, right?
Well, I think it's probably a good time to switch gears and let's look at some good examples.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we've talked about this is complex. You're trying to offer a service to every single type of person, and we know that's impossible. We can obviously strive for perfection as much as we can, but it would be good to get your thoughts on where we're seeing some really good progress. I mean, personally, airports, as you mentioned, I'm sure you can come up with lots of examples around quiet routes or sensory maps and things like that. HSBC, where I'm currently engaged with at the moment, they're always thinking of ways in which they can enhance the experience. So one of the things that they do, they have a quiet hour in some of their branches. So people with dementia and ADHD, for instance, can come in during those quieter periods. So there's small things that these organisations are actively doing. I think the problem that I find is, although the progress is there, the awareness isn't. So like this quiet hour thing, I had no idea about until obviously it doesn't concern me, but how are they making their customers aware that these services are available? But yeah, it'll be good to get some, see some good examples.
And you're right, we shouldn't focus too much on what's not right, because there's a lot that is happening, which is great. There's always more to be done, but I think that's a really good example of what the bank is doing, and it's about, I think one of the things where progress has been made is in the understanding of the unintended barriers that we're putting in place. So it might be that a banking hall at lunchtime is going to be really, really busy. But actually some people want to come when it's less quiet. And actually that suits a lot of people generally. I think one of the areas where progress really has been made is in the engagement with people who have lived experience. So a lot of the accessibility forums, whether that's for an airport, airline, rail company, bank, is reaching out to the people, the employees, because any employer, particularly the size of HSBC, is going to have a lot of people who will identify as having some kind of accessibility need. So talk to them, get them involved, but also talk to people who are out in the community, a representative charities who can just kind of bring that. Have you thought about this? Do you know that when somebody walks into a branch and there's lots of queues, that can be a horrendous experience for some, because for a lot of people that sensory reaction is amplified exponentially. So what might seem to be it's nice and busy today, plenty of people around, actually to some people that's horrendous. It's funny, one of the lessons that we learned recently, one of the airline forums, was we talk about facilitating getting people on board the aircraft first. So we often hear the announcements at the gate saying, if you're a family with children or if you have a disability, whatever, come forward, we'll get you onto the aircraft first. And actually the reality is, for some people, they want to get on last, because that whole theatre of the energy of everybody getting on the plane, of putting the bags up, of shifting, trying to ease past each other, there's announcements going on, there's people talking, that can be just a horrendous experience. So they would rather get on last. But it was only through reaching out to representative bodies and getting that lived experience into the training, as well as into the general kind of way the business goes about it.
And I think your earlier point about the way that it's defined, because it's not just about people that have physical disabilities or accessibility needs. In all of this design, it's just that fundamental understand your customers. Often I see these customer segments that are created by marketing teams and customer teams, and you look at the little avatar they create, and okay, now you've got a bit of gender in there. There might be somebody of colour in there, but you don't often see somebody who is labelled either through the way that they're represented as being in a wheelchair, or some kind of, this person has an indicator with maybe the sunflower badges put on them all to demonstrate that. So it's not always front and centre of people's mind. And I think your point earlier on is, none of this is intended. It's unintentional. I don't think anyone goes out to try and design something that people can't use. But if you don't understand your customers, you can't design it in a really deliberate fashion, right? Yeah,
no, exactly. And there's, I get that, we design for the majority and that kind of, but there's, to your original point, was it 1 in 4 people in the UK have a disability? So, there's a lot of people with a lot of spending power. So I think, in creating those personas and segmentation, I think it's really important. And again, I think that is starting to change, but the message has got to get through the whole organisation. So it might be, as you say, that the branch in-store teams have identified, well, let's make a quiet time. But that's got to be important to the marketing team as well, so that they can prioritise it and get that message out. So there's a lot of kind of internal engagement, stakeholder engagement that needs to happen as well. Otherwise, there will be pockets of teams doing stuff really well, but then just not joined up. I mean, it's a little bit like how customer experience was a few years ago, and probably is to some degree. It's kind of it's happening in pockets, but It needs to be just permeate throughout the whole
Yeah.
organization. It goes back to that, as you say, the insight about knowing your customers.
Yeah. And look, we've kind of touched on the point, and accessibility is more than a wheelchair. We've covered that in the framing of today's discussion. But I also wanted to add another lens on, which is it's not just about external customers; it's also about our colleagues and employees within. So we might be good at designing our website or our app or our accessibility into store for customers who are coming in, but are we applying the same design thinking internally? Because we will all have colleagues who have that.
Yeah.
And what worries me, I say concerns me, not worries me, maybe both. We have lots of conversation about technology, and the combination on this show is that you talk more about technology because that's your background, and I'm much more from that kind of human behavior angle. And we've had lots of conversations on here about AI and digital first and those things. How do we ensure that that same level of thinking around design is deployed internally as we bring AI co-pilots and tools and all these things in for people to deal with, particularly in frontline contact centres, but also back office? How do we ensure that happens?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and again, there's a lot more to be done. But I think that the technology is evolving. And I was with somebody the other day who has a vision impairment, and they were using voice-activated conversation with ChatGPT, and that was just allowing them to do so much stuff so much quicker, getting an answer rather than trying to use a modified keyboard and that kind of stuff. Just talking, asking the question of Copilot. It was so, and the technology's there, but I think it's a really good point that amongst our colleague cohort, there will be people who have a range of, well, we all have challenges of some sort, and everyone's on a spectrum somewhere. But I think, it's a really good point you make, that just have a look inside your own organisation, reach out to those people. And a lot of companies do have DEI type programs. Yeah. But use those people to not only design the customer experience, but also design the employee experience. Yeah. And I think you're right, from the recruitment process to the places of work, or are people able to work from home as efficiently? Do they have the right setup, the right ergonomic structures? I think also what you've tapped into there is taking it a stage further, is people internally encouraging them to come forward, if you like, with the voice of the customer, the voice of the disabled customer. So when you've got conversations around a new brand campaign, or you've got an infrastructure or an investment decision to make, well, what does that mean to people who might have an accessibility need? And if you start embedding that as part of the program methodology, so not only are you reaching out to get the voice of the customer, but you're reaching out to get the voice of the disabled customer as well. And suddenly that takes on a whole new perspective. So I think you can do a huge amount just internally. And I think that's one of the areas where things have progressed. But you're right, technology
I think
is moving on really quickly.
That's the really exciting thing for me is, we're seeing some, vendors like Microsoft, for instance. You mentioned Copilot. They're kind of been at the forefront around accessibility, way ahead compared to some of the other vendors in this space. And, with their kind of assisted technology, you mentioned obviously, stuff like, text to speech, for instance, and kind of embedding AI within that just has opened up a plethora of services that now all sorts of people can access. I think it's now that next stage of, I kind of firmly believe that the issue at the moment, the barrier is when somebody with a disability is recruited, sometimes perhaps they're apprehensive about telling the employer, and some people are shy about telling their employer that they have a specific need because it could be used against them. So it's not that barrier still exists. And I think, again, if you can make it easy for people to be able to personalize what they need without having to expose it to lots of people, then all of the services that they have access to in an organization takes that into account. Going back to the design part, I think that's really critical. But you can only design it if you know people need it. And I think there's a gap there as well.
And we were talking about it when we were coming into the studio, that the job of the CX leader, or the person who's leading the CX thinking in an organization, is often to think horizontally. You know, you're the conductor of an orchestra, you don't control all the parts, but you need them to harmonize in order to create the right outcome. You know, we talk a lot about breaking down silos, bringing people together to break down collaboration. And that's not just because we want to get, you know, processes better or we just want to design better, but the act of having people together more often broadens our horizon and our understanding. So those people who have those challenges are in those conversations to say, hey, have you thought about if somebody's, I don't know, for example, I'll go back to my experience of special needs transport with some of the kids we were transporting, certain colours, you know, the lighting on the bus, not having the same driver every single day. They would all be factors that would disrupt their journey and their experience. But it's only through being exposed to that you start to understand, and then you can make better decisions about how you deploy certain things.
Yeah, I think we underestimate sometimes the importance of predictability.
Yeah.
And managing expectations. So if you are going on that bus or that train or going to that shopping centre or the sports stadium, you know what to expect. And if it looks like something's going to take it off plan, if you like, there's been a delay or roadworks or the change of driver, then let's be proactive and just send a note to that person or their parents and say, actually, it's so-and-so who's going to be driving the bus today. And here's a photograph of them.
Yes.
And so there are ways of, again, goes back to the understand your customers, use technology to be proactive and get that message, to just manage expectations. And I've been in that situation where with my son, and it's quite horrendous for everybody. Let alone other customers, you know, when he's throwing himself on the floor and having a right tantrum as it looks. It's not great for anybody.
No.
So I think you're right, that use of technology is phenomenal and it's really powerful.
And you know, your earlier point about sharing information and data is even more important. I'm like, if the three of us had disruption on a journey, we could get on the next train, we could jump on the next plane, we could call an Uber and get into it quite easily. But if you've got a challenge, if you are in a wheelchair, if you need to have a mobility scooter, or if you've got some sensory challenges around lighting or whatever, but you've had to book in advance. Like, take coaches, for example, you know, at NX, we had one seat that was available, a wheelchair seat. Now, if you were on a journey that had a connection, if your incoming was late and you missed the one that you were booked onto, the next one might have somebody already booked into that chair, and suddenly your journey is disrupted to a degree that's way worse than somebody like us. But actually, some of those things can be solved with better connectivity, technology, sharing of data and information with colleagues, even if they couldn't get that person onto the next coach, because they knew that was happening, they can respond better.
The irony is that, so just on the, you from the outset, you mentioned obviously the opportunity, and that whole data has come from what the government's gone and published to encourage everybody, except they're not getting things right themselves. I mean, just recently, my wife's been trying to get a disabled badge for her mum, who's in severe need, and she can't get to her bank and shopping and all sorts of things because there's so much paperwork, so much process that my wife has had to go through to help her. And 3 weeks in, she still hasn't managed to get this because they don't have access to the medical records. I mean, simple things you think just joining those dots together could help, hugely improve the whole process, and then allow my mother-in-law to be able to get access to the services that she needs. So I know we've kind of gone back to where things are going wrong, and it's obviously we all have these anecdotal experiences, and it's easy to think about those negative things, but it's just knowing where we're seeing progress. I guess that's the hard part.
And it's a really good example, but I think where things are moving is slowly the conversations that companies are having internally is like, okay, not only what does this mean for customers, but what does it mean for somebody with dementia or a physical disability? And I think that it's moving slowly, it's moving in the right direction, but it's obviously, we still have a long way to go. But I mean, there was, you mentioned AI, And that's got a massive role to play, I
Yeah.
think, as long as it's used in the right way to solve the right problem.
Yes.
But take a British Sign Language. I mean, that's a lot of companies now have a digital version of British Sign Language, so that someone who is hard of hearing can understand what's going on and be involved in the experience as everybody else is.
It's a great point and example again, because in days gone by we'd normally have a different phone number that you called if you were hard of hearing, right, or you'd have to request Braille, or you'd have to do something. So there was more friction points there. But you would think with technology now that you could call the same number and be detected as somebody who needs some assistance, and without sort of what's what I'm looking for, without inconveniencing you to have to know what number to call and to do whatever. You could get the information that you need, and AI can really help with that. And the other thing I think that AI can help, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, and I keep coming back to the fact that you can transcribe and listen into calls and pick out nuances in conversations that won't necessarily be logged as a complaint that somebody's made because they've got a disability. Won't necessarily come because somebody's made a booking for that. But in the conversation, there are indicators that detect things that will help you to understand your customer base, what's going on, the challenges they have, and how you can then build that into your insights, into your organization, that the marketing team can use, that the procurement team can access. When procurement are negotiating contracts with suppliers, are they well informed on our customer base, so therefore that's translated into the conversations they're having.
Just on that last point around AI, I think AI can play a key role in being able to join the dots together. We talked about this, I think, offline as well, is how do you get all of these areas of business? AI can collect that data, push that into other businesses. I think one of the interesting, Forrester did a recent paper on accessibility around AI, and where it's lacking at the moment is it doesn't quite, we're not seeing tools built with accessibility in mind. The assumption is that AI is powerful enough to be able to help with the use cases you mentioned, where you can speak to ChatGPT, but we need different ways of being able to engage with AI. So it's not just about speaking, it's not just about typing, but actually can we introduce more inputs into AI to be able to drive more accessibility for these other users.
I think the point that you both highlighted is really key about, again, understanding customers. But I think when we look at a customer experience program, we always encourage people to get out and spend time with customers as they're experiencing it. And I think that's so much more relevant with people who might have an accessibility need, because you can see the body language, the unspoken, the head that goes down when they find out that, oh, actually, I can't get in this entrance. I've got to go round the back, use the industrial, and all that kind of stuff. And you kind of see, and even people who might just look at a retail store and go, do you know what? I'm not going to go in there.
No.
It's too bright. It's too loud. Someone in a wheelchair might think, actually, I could go in, but there's not enough room for me to turn around. Am I going to get trapped by somebody?
I remember Hollister. I think I read a study somewhere. They had that challenge because their stores are quite dark.
Yeah, they are.
And the aisles were quite narrow. So I think they had some challenges like that. And again, as well as going out and seeing what it's like for customers, it's going around your premises, your offices, and seeing what it's like for colleagues. So how many times have you been to a place where just the place where you make a cup of tea, the worktop is at the same level for everybody. The kettle's out of reach. If you're in a wheelchair, if you can't access that, and I know it's not always about wheelchairs, or if there isn't assistance for you to be able to hold on to something, or maybe it's painted the wrong color, whatever it might be, how are we thinking about that internal design as well? People that come into work, you're often faced with turnstiles and gates and having to wait for a lift. And there's also that bit about, I think you touched on it earlier on when we were talking about disruption, is that when you get onto a train, you've got to wait for a ramp to be put down. People are looking at you. I get off at New Street in Birmingham and people are crowding around the doors waiting to get on. And there's no second thought given to, hang on, somebody might be coming off that might need some assistance or getting on. And you've got poor train staff trying to push people out of the way and put the ramp down. So there's always like that kind of commotion. And I guess we just it's human nature. You see the world from your own perspective, so you operate from your own perspective. But the more that we can do to help raise that awareness, that's got to be a good thing.
And I think a lot of it is driven by the leadership team and that clarity of the brand, if you like. How is that brand going to show up? And okay, if you are promising the world that you'll give the friendliest welcome, the warmest welcome, whatever it might be, then that's a really good example. Okay, well, if someone's traveling with a wheelchair, we know there's going to be a problem at Birmingham New Street. So how are we going to mitigate that? How might we make that part of the journey for that customer dignified, personal, not a cause of anxiety or feeling like you're putting everybody else out and you're a real inconvenience? It shouldn't be like that. So I think a lot of it comes down from the very top.
It does. Sorry, Jerry, you just reminded me of an example I saw recently. So a few weeks ago when we had the storm, which affected the south of Wales and the south of the country a lot, I remember being at the station the following morning at Bristol Parkway, trying to get out into Birmingham. And we were trying to get on a train. And there was a lady who was in a wheelchair and the member of staff was waiting with her with the ramp. And 30 seconds before the train was due in, they did a platform change announcement.
Wow.
And you can imagine that there's already instructions. The platform is full of people. There's one member of staff.
Right.
Everyone's running to get onto the other platform, which is now 2 platforms away, running downstairs, and this poor lady who was in a wheelchair is kind of left there with that member of staff. She's got no chance
No way.
of getting on that train. And yet somebody must have known that was about to happen.
Yeah.
That communication to the individual that was with that customer could have been better. And actually, did you really need to change the platform?
Yeah.
Could something else have been done? Anyway, I just think there are so many examples you see.
I think those kind of edge cases or stretch cases are really important because they do show where there's a flaw in the system and the process and the experience today. And the question should be, okay, how might that not have happened? Or, I know a lot of airlines, rail companies, they all have disruption. It's how it's managed and how it's recovered. And so again, is there a way of using technology to just get that message to that person or the people they're traveling with to say, look, in about 30 seconds, we're going to put an announcement. But it goes back to that organizational culture. Our on-time operations so much more important than one person's journey, experience, dignity, and that.
And I think we kind of spoke offline around. Is it because the priority is to serve the majority? Whilst we know 1 in 4 have a need, but that 1 in 4 has a very different need from the other. So it's very difficult to even categorize that 1 in 4 as one issue. Those are a multitude of needs that these people have. Therefore, you're always going to revert to the majority, and therefore this problem will always exist. Whilst we will continue to make progress, it's impossible to meet everybody's needs. Right?
Yeah, and I think there's also an uncomfortable truth as well. Everyone's operating in a very commercial environment.
Yeah.
And at some point, there might be an intentional experience that says, well, in these circumstances, this should happen, this should be the communication, these should be the behaviours of our frontline agents. But somewhere along the line, somebody says, that's going to cost. If we want to put 2 people on that platform at Bristol Parkway, that's going to have a cost. And unless that organisation is in the right mindset and really committed to their brand promise, depends who's got the loudest voice around that top table to a degree.
I saw a great video from my good friend Vimal Rai, who lives out in Dubai and is also in the aviation space. I don't know if you've come across Vimal. And he did this great video where he was talking about the recent disruption in India with Indigo Airlines. And he talked about how you have CXs, often you have the CX operators, people that are operational, and then you have the delighters, and they sort of split camps. So you have you're all about the delivery, the excellence, the do it at lowest cost possible, operational mindset, and then people that will know it's about delighting customers, and they're falsely separated, but they should be one and the same. But the bit that's missing is that leadership in the organisation to drive that culture. And when things like this happen, how that shows up is where the cracks are in your systems, your process, your whatever,
Yeah.
because no technology is going to fix the empathy. I'm paraphrasing them, or 300 angry customers at an airport is not going to be fixed by AI or some digital thing.
No.
It's going to be fixed by a human, but that human needs to be empowered and able to do the right
Exactly,
things
yeah.
in order to solve it.
And have the tools and the
And have the
information.
tools.
And,
So
yeah.
it still comes back to technology in a sense, but you just got to communicate that information to the right people at the right
Yeah,
time as
but-
well, I guess.
But technology is the enabler.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not the
it is.
answer, right?
No,
You
it's not,
still
yeah.
need the wraparound culture
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people to use the technology
Yeah,
in order to do the
That's
right
true,
things.
Yeah,
And we could rely on the goodwill of organisations to do
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and some will.
yeah.
But there are legal implications
Yeah,
and legal
yeah.
risks here. And
Yeah.
there was a couple, but doing some research for the show today. Like Pizza Hut, a blind customer couldn't use their app. They were taken to the Supreme
That was
Court.
Domino's Pizza. by the
Domino's
way,
Pizza.
not
Sorry, not
Hut.
pizza. Sorry, correction. Not Pizza Hut. Domino's Pizza, where we're taken to court. United Airlines, wheelchair damage leading to a customer suffering harm, and there's a federal investigation going on. American Airlines, a record $50 million penalty for repeatedly failing on accessibility. And then you've got the Equality Act, and then there's an EU Accessibility Act coming. So you've got all of these legal frameworks coming in. So if organisations don't look at it through a culture, let's do the right thing for the customer perspective, their hand is going to be forced
Yeah.
by regulation, by legislation.
Yeah, and in a perfect world, we wouldn't need that
No.
legislation or regulation. But it is what it is, if you like. And I think, so yeah, I think that's great. I think having the regulatory frameworks really helps it become a strategic priority within the organisation. I think there's still a long way to go as well, because there are certain markets where there are, if you like, no financial penalties, certainly in the UK and the EU. And so if you're cynical, you could say, well, actually, because somebody knows that we're not going to get fined,
Yeah.
then
It's not priority.
it's not the same priority, which is it's completely wrong, but is the reality of the situation. So I think where organisations are encouraged and nurtured to do the right thing, that's great. But I think the regulatory framework has to be on a par with the commercial
Yeah.
priorities as well.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's, from experience, when it comes to these types of regulations, it becomes a very much a tick box exercise. So you kind of do the absolute minimum that you need to
Yeah.
to
To meet the regulation.
to meet that regulation, and that's, I guess, there's a danger of that as well.
Yeah, I think so. I have to say the regulatory guidance is incredibly useful for a lot of organisations who are like, okay, well, where do we start? How do we do this?
Yeah.
What should we be considering? You know, the guidance and the frameworks that the regulators offer is invaluable. But then it's like, okay, well, what happens if we don't adhere to these?
Yeah.
Is it like having an Ofsted inspection, or is it like having? You kind of would want it to be more the Michelin star thing. So actually, you don't get penalised for it; you get rewarded and heralded, and
Yes.
championed and celebrated for doing
Eh,
the right thing.
We've concentrated on various parts of the journey, but accessibility appears in every single point of the journey.
Yeah.
From your branding, your advertising, your visual representation of how your customers are. If customers cannot see themselves in your story,
Yeah.
they don't engage with
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
And that's part of accessibility. It's the way they contact you, your website, your app, your store, your after-sale support, the hoops they've got to jump to return an item, all of the touch points along that, and then how that bleeds into back office in terms of procurement and finance, and it's everywhere, right? Now, you could turn it on its head and say, back to the beginning of the conversation, the size of the prize, to use a phrase, is big. Somebody's going to get that right. Organizations we've got infinite choice. We've got so much access to services across the world. And yet people coming up with these experiences where they can't do. Somebody's going to get that right. And when they get it right, what a great point of differentiation. Can't even get the word out.
Yeah.
What a great point of difference. We often look for that. What's our competing factor? What's the USP?
Yeah.
And when somebody gets it right, and I've been lucky enough to see some great innovation over the years of people that have done things getting it right. There was a when I ran the innovation lab, there was a coach or a travel company called Limitless that really focused on travel for people that had mobility challenges, and they created a way that people could travel with multiple wheelchairs in one go, not just one wheelchair at a time. They put on specific holidays and tours, all catered around that group of people. Now, this is going back 7 or 8 years. But since then, there must be other people who have done that. I mean, you were talking about using voice apps. I don't have, that I know of, any disabilities or challenges. But bloody hell, do I love talking to ChatGPT and to my iPhone and stuff instead of having to type. Like, it's just an inconvenience to type now. Yeah. So I use those features, but they're there to be leveraged to improve access.
Yeah, and you say you don't have any disabilities. It's kind of, but we all have needs.
Yes.
We all need to be able to communicate.
Yes.
Some people do it in different ways.
Yeah.
Some people understand the world in different ways. Some people interpret what's going on in different ways. And I think that's the real challenge and the beauty of it as well. Thankfully, we're all different. What you made me think of was who gets it right in terms of what the person who wins and wins out is. And a couple of examples spring to mind. One is, if like the Special Olympics. So we have the Olympics, we have the Paralympics. There's also the Special Olympics for neurodivergent people. And it's just phenomenally powerful and inspirational to see those people competing and taking part. But there's also, again, on a sporting level, something my son took part in it's a series called the Superhero Triathlon. It's basically sponsored by Marvel Comics and that sort of thing. They're superheroes, and it's a triathlon, but basically anything goes. So for the swim, it was done down at Eton Dorney in the UK, where they had the Olympic rowing contest. And the swim is only 100 metres, but Charlie didn't have to swim. He gets towed in a dinghy. So I swim with my daughter and my brother-in-law. We tow him, so that's his swim. He does the dinghy. When it comes to the bike, Charlie rides a three-wheeled trike. So he does that, and he's just very happy on his own. Yeah. And then when it comes to the run, he just stays on his bike. Yeah. But if you want to get a fireman's lift because you can't work, or so anything, if it's going to take you 3/4 of an hour to do the 100 metres, that's absolutely fine. You do it at your pace, your way. And what's so empowering about that event is it just said there are no barriers. Yeah. And it really is, this is what it's stripped down. Yeah. There are no barriers. Everybody can do what they want in that context. And it is quite, you come away from events like that thinking, actually now I can see barriers everywhere. Yeah, because if I'm trying to operate my keyboard, but what happens if I haven't got use of my hands? Or what happens if I haven't got vision? Yeah. How do I navigate the world then? It's just, so yeah, I think you're right. So it's a really long-winded answer, but I think there are, to the people who get it right, it's they will be inspirational as well as successful.
Yes, totally agree. It comes back to like why I do any of the work that I do is all about human enrichment. It's about how do you enrich the experience that people have of life through the things that they do, whether that's the experience of taking part in an event, dealing with a brand, doing the things that they do. That's the kind of common thread.
Yeah,
great.
So I think I guess our last segment of this session is all about what good looks like. So it'd be great to maybe get some examples of what a blueprint for leaders should be. We talked about these initiatives starting at a leadership level, but when it comes to seeing some examples of again what good looks like, it'd be great if you could share some of those. Whether it comes to testing journeys with real users, spending time with the types of people that you want to try and serve. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, and that's a lot of it, to be honest. I mean, if you're looking for a place to start, then talk to people who have the lived experience themselves. Follow their journey. Yes, it's one thing to, they say walk in another person's shoes, and okay, you can try a wheelchair, but there's nothing like go with that person that's in the wheelchair and see it and get them to give a running commentary on what they're thinking, seeing, feeling, that kind of thing. So I think just what good looks like is just an open-mindedness, I think, particularly of the leadership team, that will say this is important to us as an organisation because it's important to our customers and therefore it's important to us. Build and then formalising, if you like, that communication with people with lived experience. So having a cohort of people to go to and say, we're thinking of doing this, how should we approach it? What should we be looking out for? But also, hopefully, in that process, you'd have your employees who have lived experience as well. So embracing them, getting them involved, and participating in that whole process. Training is another area where the good companies have really good training, and often that is delivered by people with lived experience. So what are the behaviours that you want them to exemplify? How do you interact with somebody who is maybe neurodivergent but really, really anxious or almost on the edge of having an epileptic fit or whatever it may be? How do you interact with those? So give your people the training and the headroom, if you like, to say, actually, it's okay. Actually, with this person, I'm going to have to spend 10 minutes with this person. That's okay, because I'm not measured on how quickly I can process somebody. I'm measured on the dignity that person has from their experience.
That's right.
So I think the training is really, really important. And communication and raising awareness about and celebrating the good things that happen as well.
I think that's the key thing. I think that's the missing piece for me that I find, whether it's as an employee in an organisation or as a customer or somebody, as like I said with my son, it's I have to go and seek out this information, and I think that's always so that communication part I think is so key to that.
Because if you book a ticket at a festival, music festival, right, there's some fantastic experiences that are happening. Again, cinemas. You mentioned the making time in a banking hall. So there's lots of that. But it's kind of, I wouldn't say look at what's going on to steal those concepts, but steal the principles behind it. And how did they get to that point? What's the internal thinking, culture, behaviours that gets to that point?
I completely agree with all of those. And I think in that last point about stealing people's other ideas, it's also looking outside your industry. I think too often teams can become blinkered about just looking within the industry they operate. But when you look outside and you see the way that people apply maybe the same technologies you already have, but in a novel way to deal with the problem or a challenge or an issue or an accessibility need or an inclusion need, whatever the thing might be, that inspires you to think about what you already have and go, actually, we could do this way, we could do that way. So the answers are always there. It's about looking beyond, I call it breaking borders, looking beyond your borders and getting out and going and seeing things. So I think, really powerful stuff. But it does start with very much that leadership conversation, getting out there and seeing things. And in that leadership conversation, constantly making sure that this is part of the conversation. There's that famous Amazon story, isn't there, about how there's always an empty chair left in the room and they turn to it and say, what would the customer say? Well, what if it wasn't a chair? What if it was a wheelchair? What if it was a mobility scooter? Or what if it was something that represented somebody that has ADHD? Because at the moment when you think, what would the customer say? You're almost still forward into going, well, it's a customer who could sit in that chair and maybe look like how we all look or operate how we all look. To your point about walking in the customer's shoes, I've said often that the trouble with that is that you've got to take your own shoes off first. And people aren't able to do that. So you could sit in a wheelchair, but you're never going to get the real experience.
No. And I think it kind of goes full circle in a way to your very first point at the start with Brand. It comes from the leadership, but it's not just about the commercial value that it brings. There's a lot of brand equity that it's going to generate, and also employee pride as well. You can see it in organisations that get it right. These people are really proud to give that service.
They absolutely are. And the brand equity thing, we haven't even touched on that, but there's so much research that we've talked about generations looking at brands and aligning with their values and the way they are. This is part of that mix. It's part of the marketing mix. And so it shouldn't be something separate from that. Okay, look, final reflections. We're out of time. So, Jerry, one belief that leaders need to drop in order to move forward, do you think? Is there something that you would, if you could only had 30 seconds with a leader, what would you say to them?
I'd say reach out to people with lived experience and really understand their world and what it's like for them to interact with your brand.
No, and I think we kind of touched on this. I think it's creating a brand that emphasizes the point around inclusivity, and we talked about people with disabilities, but this is about meeting the needs of everybody, because everybody has different needs, and I think once you can create type of culture within an organization, then you end up with a brand that people want to not just interact with, engage with, but also work for as well. And I think that's been very insightful, Jerry, speaking to you today, and learned a hell of a lot around this subject.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been great to talk about it with you guys. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, it's to get it right is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's got to fit in with all the operational requirements of the business. But yeah, to get it right, you can make a real difference to somebody's life.
So Jerry, just one final thing. If people want to get in touch with you to talk to you more about it, if they've been inspired by something they've heard today and want to really explore getting this right in their organisation, how can they get hold of you? What's the best way?
Yeah, Jerry Angrave on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way, or through Empathise website. But yeah, probably LinkedIn is the easiest way. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, yeah, absolutely.
We'll put the link in the description so people will be able to get hold of it. I hope you've enjoyed that episode. If you found something in it that inspires you to think differently, please do us a favour and subscribe so you'll get the alert for the next episode. It might seem like a small thing to you, but it really does help us to reach more people and share more of this great content. As I said, Breaking the Blueprint was all about expanding the conversation, getting more people involved in thinking through the lens of the customer to improve services and really enrich the experience that we have of the things that we do in life. Until the next episode, take care. Goodbye.